I'm going to give you my honest feelings on based on what I'm seeing and hearing, and honestly, also my complete unbiased opinion of what's going on in the food industry. And again, why am I talking about food industry? Well, because think about if you're looking in the new year to change some of your habits, you're probably going to want to know what's going to be really available, what's going to be trending, what might be more affordable. Today, we're just going to be talking about what people might be trying in 2024. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Brave Today podcast. This show is going to encourage, challenge, maybe even provoke you to step outside of your comfort zone and take more action to better improve yourself and your health. Now, I am your host, Mark Avens, and in this crazy upside down world that seems to keep pushing a narrative for people to become soft, weak, sick, unhealthy, and more dependent than ever, the goal and intent of the show is to help you navigate through this so that you can become braver today than you were yesterday. Now, listen, a few details about the show. We do different types of shows. Today is actually the flavor of the week. I'll be talking about trends in foods for the new year, 2024. What kind of food trends, what I think of those, going to give you my opinion on what I've been looking into, what I hear and see, and sharing that with you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Basically, I'll be picking apart things like workouts and fads and pills and potions and diet trends. And today is going to be more on food. I hope you guys are going to enjoy this show today. Also, if you've listened to any of our other shows, you know we do Brave Q&As where I answer questions that you have and want answers to. So if you have a question about health, fitness, weight loss, anything pretty much goes. You can just drop your questions. If you're catching me on the YouTube or you're catching me on a podcast or Spotify, just drop a question down and I may be answering that on one of our next Brave Q&A shows. Also, we have Brave guest interviews where I bring on people who I admire, who are not only brave today, but are also helping people become braver today than they were yesterday. And then we also have a breakthrough episodes where I'll take a deep dive into an area, be it physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, basically any area that could be holding you back, and providing insight and guidance to help you have a breakthrough on your personal health and fitness journey. With all of that said, I haven't done a breakthrough episode in a while, definitely overdue. And actually this week I'm a little behind. We are in the process of moving into a new home, and that has definitely taken any extra time away. But I have pledged to be on here to bring you at least one to, if not 2 to 3 shows per week. So in that, I appreciate you guys for your patience. And today, I hope you're going to enjoy what I have for you. And that is top foods, things that are trending. Top foods that are trending now. I pulled up some research and I did a little bit of behind the scenes looking into what's going to be trending in 2024. What are people talking about? And we're going to just look into that now. I wonder actually what you are thinking about that. And by all means, please feel free to ask me questions, comment. I'd love to hear your opinion on what you've heard, what you've seen. Maybe you've done some research. I want this to be as interactive as possible, although you're catching this show after I've recorded it. But for now, as you're listening in, you think like food trends, right? Like they say Whole Foods. Before we get into it, let's talk about some of the things, low carbohydrates. You think of like low processed stuff, things that are trending in the food industry. It's kind of really in a weird place right now. And I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I'm going to give you my honest feelings based on what I'm seeing and hearing, and honestly, also my, complete unbiased opinion of what's going on in the food industry. And again, why am I talking about food industry? Well, because think about if you're looking in the new year to change some of your habits, you're probably going to want to know what's going to be really available, what's going to be trending, what might be more affordable. Today, we're just going to be talking about what people might be trying in 2024, some food trends. Couple things, let's go through it. We'll see how many we get to. I have at least 10 to 15. We may not get to all of those. Of course, grains, like whole grains, healthy grains, unprocessed grains. That's one of the things they talk about buckwheat being like the it grain, and it's low processed and as good as far as like gluten-free products, things like that. And, one of the things as far as with something like a grain, people are like, well, I have an allergy to grains. And I know that will be something that might be challenging, but you see it in a lot of things. You see it in all kinds of like the processed stuff. You see the grains in the process. But I think overall, just if you just think back to hundreds and hundreds of years ago when they got introduced and thousands of years ago, and again, it is a sustainable grain. Like a grain can give you fuel and energy. The problem is we don't nearly move as much as we used to. So, as you kind of go in and maybe venture into trying things like buckwheat and maybe quinoa and some other grains in the new year, you're like, oh, I need to eat some of that healthy stuff. It's high in fiber. It'll keep me fuller longer. just be aware that while that comes at a price, because some of those do come with high caloric content, carbs are not the enemy, but they can become the enemy if you actually aren't going to use those. That's just one of them, grains. One of the other things too I've seen, and I don't know if you've noticed this in the past year, botanicals with like kind of interesting ingredients like herbs and roots and flowers and things like that. You see them in like in sparkling waters, botanical waters, things like that. Those are becoming more and more introduced in different, and gosh, this seems to be like 100,000 different types of drinks, energy drinks. There's things like botanical drinks that instead of an alternate to like a high caffeinated drink or a more natural approach, that's going to be something. I'll be honest with you. I have an energy drink here and there. I actually work with a supplement company. I don't need to share what that is, who that is, because I don't make any proceeds from that. But I do know that you want to be careful because you don't really know. And unless you do like a deep dive into the company, what actually goes into it. I think there's just so many. Of course, when it comes down to what you're hydrating your body with, water is going to be the ultimate best choice. As old and as archaic it is, water, making sure you're drinking plenty of water. So I would just be aware, not get too kind of tied up. Plus, it could be really costly. They put fancy words behind labels and stuff, and they have good marketing. You can definitely, spend a lot of money. If you want to save, your best bet is just drinking good old-fashioned water, right? Now, remember back in the day, we actually used to drink water. We could drink it from the hose. What happened to those days? And now you got to buy bottled water or filters and all kinds of crazy stuff. And even then, you don't even know what's coming out of that faucet. So that's one of the other things. You know me at all, and you know that I like chocolate. Well, of course, chocolate, there's things coming out now with chocolate. And they even have, I saw it, can't remember what this was. I think it was maybe in Daily Meal. One of the research articles that I was looking into talked about there's actually chocolate for women now, like specific. And I'm really going to get into that too much, but I do know that cacao or the pulp, like that's something that's going to come. The beans, cacao beans. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. That's the way I'm pronouncing it. So tomato, cocoa beans or cacao beans. And that's something that as far as going to be the pulp of cacao, kind of like the pulp of coconut, like the coconut pieces, that's going to be something that's going to be introduced a little bit more. You're going to see that as a trend that's coming in 20. That's what they're predicting. And of course, the big giant companies, Nestle's and some of the other ones are already jumping after that. So do your due diligence on there too. Always when it sounds too good or it tastes too good, you got to be careful of what's in it or to not overindulge in that. And of course, I'm not knocking chocolate because I like a good piece of chocolate and I can get carried away with it. But it is something, again, in moderation with some of those confectionaries and some of those things that could easily pack on the calories and, of course, the pounds that go with that. Now, here's one more I noticed. I tried, and you know what? The verdict's still out. I'm not too sure if I actually really, if I buy it yet. I was always a fan of mushrooms. I remember growing up as a kid, and my parents would take me to this. We lived sort of in a rural area. My grandfather was a farmer, and there was a little area town, and we had a couple restaurants. We had no fast food restaurants where we lived. There was only some mom and pops. And I remember going to a burger place in our little kind of village, so to speak. And it was a burger place. And one of the things I always look forward to is the fried mushrooms. So we get a burger and we'd always get as an appetizer as a family, fried mushrooms. I know it sounds weird, in horseradish sauce or horseradish dressing. It was so good. And I don't know, I know you either love mushrooms or you hate them. That seems to be this. And they're like, mushrooms are okay. Most people that love them or hate them. But what I'm finding now is you find mushrooms as like an alternative. One thing I've noticed is in coffee, they're starting to innovate and try to make alternatives to coffee, more of a natural kind of, it's more of a trending food they're starting to use instead of like fried mushrooms or, put mushrooms in an omelet or something like that. They're using mushrooms. I even saw in the grocery store the other day, they had mushrooms that were based, it was like a jerky. It was like a plant-based jerky, and that was out of mushrooms. You know what? There's nothing better than like real jerky. I know, don't knock it till you try it, but I'm just not sold on that yet. Nor am I on the coffee. I know there's like such great benefits to certain mushrooms and fungi, if you will, but I'm still not sure if I'm willing to give up my coffee in the morning to have like a mushroom-based coffee. I know there's things, and I know what like lion's mane, I believe, is a type of mushroom, and some of that stuff they're doing as alternatives to coffee. So we'll see. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you thought as far as like mushrooms, if you've tried mushroom coffee before. I know that's something that's been pretty trendy, starting to trend this past year, maybe even sooner. maybe even earlier than that. I just noticed that I even tried it a couple times and I'm just not sold. I like a good cappuccino or just our regular coffee in the morning. And I know people have mixed opinions on coffee. And of course, it's like anything, right? Like I'm not saying moderation, but if you turn too much of a good thing into a God thing, then it become a bad thing. So if you're drinking coffee all day long, then probably you want to have a double check to make sure that you're drinking enough water and you're not overdoing it. And that's no different than if it's mushroom coffee, if it's regular coffee from like regular coffee beans. And that is something that is going to be, I think, a big trend moving into the new year. I don't know who started that. Mushrooms have been around for years. And now all of a sudden they're starting to do this. I don't know, this whole like vegetarian movement, vegan movement, avoiding meat. I mean, that seems to be like something that's being pushed by marketing efforts, and I'm not sold. In fact, one of the things since moving here to Colorado, I found myself looking into more different types of meat. Bison, we found a really great bison farm here. Local farmers that have, I think, maybe 60, 70 head of bison. We met them at a farmer's market, got connected, and man, it is some of the most delicious bison we've had. Bison jerky, and we've had steaks and ground beef, and it just tastes different than from the store. Fortunately, we have access to somebody here local, and I'll tell you what, there's nothing better. The taste is unreal. So good. If you ever want to know where I get it from, reach out and I'd be happy to connect you. And they ship all over the country, so which is pretty cool. Of course, anything with spicy flavors, sweet flavors, things like that, hot flavors. Of course, I don't know if you're a condiment fan. We tend to get overrun with condiments in my house. I say that's my wife's doing. She loves the condiments for different things. But I know like spicy. In fact, we had our date night the other night and we went out to Thai food. It was a new Thai place somebody recommended. It was phenomenal. It was a little spicy, and without any hair, you know when it's a little too spicy and my head starts to sweat. I know you guys out there that you get spicy food and your head starts to like sweat like you're running a marathon. Well, that happened to me last night. But I don't think that any like the sweet and spicy, like the chili sauces and those type of things, that's probably those type of products they're predicting to actually even grow in the new year as well, starting to put them on top of burgers and chicken, and you see them on even some fancy restaurants as well. Let's go back to beverages, because we talked about the botanicals. One of the other things that's being predicted in the new year, the beverages that are kind of lower in sweetness and have different alternatives. I think that kind of goes and lies with the botanicals, but instead of like you see some of the big powerhouses in the energy drinks, I think you see a lot more. And I've noticed over the last maybe 5-10 years, there's a lot of different types of sparkling seltzers. I even saw the other day, I don't know if you ever heard of this. I've never had it. It's called Athletic, I believe. And I have no affiliation with them, but Athletic, they make a beer product, I believe, and I'm not sure if it's an Odell brewing beer. We here in Colorado have some of the best breweries. And one of the things what I saw, I was interested in it to see, it said Athletic, and it was non-alcoholic beer product. And I know they've been around for a while, but they're starting to trend differently as well. And I think even just with regular drinks, mocktails are starting to become even more and more popular. And also you're seeing that mixed in with some of these other kind of trendy type of drinks, sparkling flavored beverages and stuff that have been around for a while. I'll never forget. I remember when they first came out. I don't know if you guys can remember back. It was probably in the 80s, I want to say, maybe mid 80s, when sparkling drinks and water, bottled water, you had like the Avion waters come out and some of the other Pellegrinos and Poland spring waters. And then I remember they started to make flavored water. And one of the first, if you remember, we're going to throw back now, Clearly Canadian was one of those. And I actually believe they still have that out in the market some places. Maybe it's a throwback or retro, but the Clearly Canadian, they made like a flavored beverage. And I remember that. I worked in a little country deli and they had a cooler and it was near the beach. It was a country deli, but we were out in Long Island. It was close to the beach. And I remember having to stock the shelves with all these drinks. I was a stock boy. I basically stocked the shelves. And one of the things I had to make sure the cooler was filled with cold drinks. And so I got around all of the stuff and I saw these new things come out. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Now it's like exploded. But I do think that one of the big trends and what I'm hearing and seeing is the lower sweetness beverages, maybe the more natural approach to beverages, giving you guys an alternative to, just soda. It's one thing I think that has really gotten away with so much over the years. You see those restaurants you go in and you can kind of push a button and you can get 20, maybe 200 different types of drinks and you can mix them all and it's behind a machine. And I have no idea, but I know it's not good for you. I don't even honestly know if a lot of this stuff is good for you. But like I said, go back to the old fashioned water and you'll be probably the safest going into the new year. But a lot of these trending things that you're coming out, they have turmeric in them and, natural orange flavoring and all those types of things. You'll be seeing those more and more to come. Now, next, let's go into another trend. And I'm definitely very biased on this one. I will say I haven't had great sushi since I've been here to Colorado. Nothing knocking. I haven't really just ventured out. I'm living in Florida. We had really, really great access to some really great seafood. And one of those also being sushi. But one of the things, and I'm definitely not sold on this, I have very strong opinions on this. And I don't know if you do, this plant-based seafood. It's kind of like the plant-based meat products and the fake meat and stuff. And you know what? I'm not sold. I don't think I'm ever going to be sold on that. Vegetables are vegetables and meat is meat. Don't try to like cross change what's going to be what, and even seafood for that matter. Now, I will say that I did when my parents couldn't afford to have seafood all the time growing up, and we didn't have it. Fortunately, where I lived in Long Island, we had some access to it, and we'd go fishing. My dad would go clamming, and we'd have access to that. But I do remember, you guys remember the imitation crab meat, the fake crab meat in there? That was some of the best stuff ever. We'd make like crab salad, but it was the imitation kind of crab. And some of you guys that call yourself sushi experts, you say, yeah, I love sushi. And then what do you have? You have like the one with imitation crab or a vegetarian roll, which is not sushi. Raw like sushi. We're talking raw fish. But I do know that, and I'm actually starting to see this, there's plant-based seafood that's starting to establish itself. Now, I spent some time after college. I moved to New York City. And that's a whole story in and of itself. And that was back in the mid 90s. So mid 90s, after I graduated my degree in physical therapy, worked in New York City. And I'll never forget, I worked in a orthopedic hospital, but I had my first experience was in a subacute rehab where I worked basically in a nursing home. And I was helping older people that broke their hips, fell, had stroke, things like that, couldn't go back in their homes or were trying to get rehab to get back into their homes. And some of them lived on like fourth floor walk-ups. They were 80 years old, but they were hardcore New Yorkers, right? They wanted to get back to independence. And I'll never forget the small crew that I worked with. They were awesome. And one guy in particular, Russian guy, and he kept telling me about sushi. And I'd never had sushi before. I've had regular fish, always cooked fish, but never tried sushi. But at that time, this is in the mid 90s, sushi was everywhere in New York City, as it was in most metropolitan areas. So I caved in and I said, all right, you can take me. Go ahead, take me to your sushi place. He was telling me about the sushi chef he knows. You got to just trust me on this. So anyway, long story short, we went one time and I was completely blown away. I was blown away at how expensive it was. And little did I realize it was going to cost me a lot of money moving forward. But that night was a special night. And I'll never forget, we literally just right after work, he took me to the sushi place. It was on the west side of Manhattan, right near Lincoln Center. It's not there anymore. I think it's a bakery now. And it was such a cool experience. So we got there. He even told me where the pecking order is in sushi. I learned all about like the background of sushi and sushi chefs. And there's like one main chef, and then you have your guy that does the to-go orders, and there's like a pecking order. Anyway, so I sat there, I had no idea what I was eating. And he said, you just got to trust me. Just eat it. He said, this is this. I don't even know what this is. Just eat it. And I was pretty adventurous at that time. So I took it, and it was probably the single most really amazing experience I had with food ever. And that was a turning point for me to become really a lover of sushi, good sushi. What happened is it ended up costing me a lot of money because I went back every week and it was not cheap. And if you go to a real sushi place and you have real sushi, we're not talking like you go and you have the rolls that are all covered in sauces and crunchy stuff and, what most Americans do and eat as far as rolls, nothing knocking it. That's just kind of what most people do. But going to a sushi restaurant and have a chef prepare you sushi and you don't even order, he basically prepares you what is fresh for the day. It was amazing. I think they call it omakase. I think it's called that. where it's like the chef selection. Unfortunately, it's really expensive. So I was only able to do that while I was in New York and single and didn't have kids and other obligations and income to do that. But there was something that I've always enjoyed real sushi. And I think because of that first experience, I'm never going to be sold back to kind of what we're talking about here in plant-based. I'm never going to be sold on the plant-based stuff ever. I don't know if you are. Good luck with that. Plus, when they start changing up things and start making like salmon that's based with like carrots or whatever they're going to do, I don't know how they make it taste good, but I know probably for the most part is probably not healthy for you. Give me the fresh stuff. Anyway, let's move forward. One of the other things I did hear and see, and this is actually kind of goes in lines. You see these like drinks that are also being made, and they're trying to be more like environmentally minded in these products. And actually what they're starting to do is looking at food waste and using food waste to make drinks like even sake, which is really, I don't have too much information on this other than I did see this in a few places, and products that are made from food waste. And I know like, oh, it sounds really great, help save the environment and all that kind of stuff. But I'm really not that I'm not an environmental. I want to have the environment good, but I do think a lot of the stuff is pushed on us. If give you my honest opinion, I think a lot of this stuff, which is interesting because people that talk about environmental changes and all that stuff or go flying around in their private jets, they have cars and they're in homes that are all not environmentally friendly. So like, again, it's, I will say is a bit hypocritical out there with a lot of things in that respect, not to get into it, but I do hear as far as like some alcoholic beverage companies are using like food waste. And all sounds good on the front end, but usually you go looking behind the scenes and it's just more of a marketing ploy on that. To me, there's another thing too, and I don't know, it's kind of funny. I haven't had this except for my wife and I were out in Whistler. We did a really cool event called Everesting 29029. And basically what we did was climb a mountain 8 times. And that actually, we had 36 hours to do basically the vertical of Everest. It ended up being 32 miles, which is crazy. And we did it. We successfully, it was one of our big challenges in 2023. We successfully completed it. But what I bring to you is the food that we had, because we were in this event and it was nonstop. You had 36 hours to do this. We had to fuel our bodies because we were running out of energy. And they had aid stations and they had things, all kinds of stuff. They had protein, they had carbs, they had Pop-Tarts. And one of the things they also had were the instant soups, like the instant soups, and ramen noodles was one of them. And I'll never forget climbing the gondola down, because you climb up the mountain, take the gondola down. And on our way down, when we were like maybe 5th lap, 6th lap in, it was the middle of the night, and we were climbing through the night, and they had food for us, right? We had missed dinner because we wanted to just keep going. So they had these ramen noodles in the little cup of ramen, right? Cup of noodle soup and ramen noodles. And one of the things, it kind of brought me back to like college days when you couldn't afford a food or you just wanted something that was cheap, salty, and man, it hit the spot. It tasted so good, almost as good as the sushi I was just talking about at the time. But I do see, and you see a trend in all these like gourmet instant noodles that's starting to pop up. I noticed that different types of noodles. I even noticed that they have like protein. I think it's called, the polar bear or polar, I can't remember, but they have these like pancakes that have these pancake containers. And I know we just went from noodles to pancakes real quick, but I'm just thinking of some of these like gourmet pancake mixes. And one of the things I did notice too, and I actually been looking into these gourmet instant noodles, not just ramen noodles. Now there's other companies trying to make their way in, kind of like the energy drinks. And there are these like gourmet type of energy drinks. And it seems like that's the case in everything, right? You see everything like yogurt, and there's these like gourmet yogurts, right? Like they're fancy and they're in a glass and they charge you more. And it's kind of like an offshoot, just trying to make, whether it's organic or if it's from France or whatever it is. I even see these instant noodles, and you see that they're coming into this whole new realm of all these fancy types of noodles and things like that. And I think we've seen that in pretty much all products, right? You've seen it with cereals, you've seen it with crackers, you've seen it with all this, the day-to-day stuff that you go to the grocery store and see. Now there's huge shelf, like there's a whole aisle just for cereal. Well, you're starting to see that with soups. There's always been like for Campbell's soup, but it was your basics, right? Like your cup of noodle soup or your Lipton soups and your chicken rice soup, your tomato soup. And now there's like all kinds of fancy different soups. And you even see that in the gourmet stores. So I think that's going to be also moving into the future, and stuff that's ready made, really easy. Just put some water and heat it up, throw it in the microwave and go. One of the other things, this is interesting. Because when you think about like treats and desserts, and what I've noticed and seen over the years is that the size of the dessert, the portion size is just bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Just like you see a hamburger 20 years ago versus today. The difference is like, the size of a burger is huge. You can split one with like, or you can split it with like 3 people, some of the burgers that are out there. But one of the things that I saw is there's these treats, like single serve treats that are becoming the norm. You go to like maybe a dessert place, or you want, instead of a full cupcake, you get a little cupcake, right? There's like little ones, like little minis. And that's something that's supposed to be a trend. I haven't seen it too much. I think if you go to some gourmet, but apparently it is trending now. It's going to be trending in the new year. Instead of like a slice of cake, they might have these little mini cakes or these little mini pies. Actually, we did see that. And I saw that at the farmer's market. There was a few things and they were like mini desserts. So you can like have it, but it was like, instead of like a whole pie, it was like a single pie. And that'd be something that, may be good, but what's to prevent you, if it was really good, to not have 4 or 5 of them? Give yourself, it's kind of like, you think of Halloween candy, right? And you think of the little tiny candy pieces, and you think of like a Snickers bar versus the little tiny, well, you're not going to just have one little Snickers, one little individually wrapped Snickers piece of cake. You're going to have like 6 or 7. You might as well just go have a regular Snickers bar. And I'm not here to condone and promote having a whole big giant dessert. So we'll see. I like when my wife and I go out and we enjoy, say we go out to date night and we haven't split a dessert after our dinner, is we'll share a dessert, and they're big enough. And even sometimes we had one like a month or 2 ago. We had a dessert on a date night, and it was a piece of cake. It was really just, I think it was a carrot cake, and we split it and we still couldn't finish it. We did have a coffee, I think a cappuccino with it. So I don't know, when you kind of mix that together, sometimes it's filling, and we did have dinner. So we just have a sweet tooth, and we didn't even finish like splitting cake between each other, which is really goes to show. So this could be a good way. Hey, we'll just have a little mini one. So single serve treats is supposed to become the norm. We'll see what happens in 2024. I'd love to hear what you think about that. Just let me know, drop a comment below, and love to hear what you think about the single serve treats on that. And then I already did talk about the clean energy drinks. I kind of touched base on that. We'll go one more in there. There's these all different companies. See a lot of influencers and people that are building their own brands and branching out into like energy drinks, natural energy, purely from plants rather than artificial means. And again, I won't spend too much time on there, but I think that's clearly the case, that things that are to come in the new year, these kind of like boutique style or more like specialty drinks that are avoiding the sugars and the artificial ingredients and all that kind of stuff. Other than that, I didn't mention, as far as something that I thought was really interesting, health food products that are just like specifically for women. In fact, I even saw they had a chocolate, it was a period chocolate, which I just don't know how that's going to be different than any other chocolate. But again, and I'm not the expert on it, I just saw that. I thought that was interesting. And then there's a couple other things. Let's see here, things that I kind of found. Of course, I mentioned the plant-based, and I mentioned the cocoa, and then I mentioned the buckwheat, and I mentioned the fish. And then I think there was one other thing, if you bear with me. Oh, one of the other things I did notice, and I even noticed it here in Colorado a little bit more so, because marijuana is legal here in other areas. But I do notice like the CBD markets and the infused things, whether it be gummies or like food products that have the CBD in them. I think that's going to continue to grow as well. People are kind of moving away from the pharmaceuticals and maybe going towards more natural based alternatives to healing, to pain control, those type of things. So I would imagine that's going to also trend in the new year. I did see that as well. And anything that I missed, I'd love to hear if you think there's something that you have seen, and I'd love for you to share with me. You feel like it's going to be trending, something you found out, maybe something that's really worked, something that you really found helpful to you. Anyway, with that said, I do hope that that's all I have for the show. And if you enjoyed the show, all I ask is to help support this podcast. Just subscribe, share the show with your friends. And if you want to stay up to date with our show and get behind the scenes content, you can also follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook, YouTube. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. And I have something really exciting I'm not going to share just yet, but I have a very, very exciting thing I've been working on behind the scenes that's going to be coming in the new year. That's today's show. I hope you have an amazing, blessed day. Take care. We'll see you soon.